Hey everyone, how you doing? It's Dr. Nick, and I wanted to give you a really quick training on really the big picture of what it takes to have an online business these days. I'm going to use an example of an e-commerce store selling physical products, but this applies to a lot of businesses. And it's going to show you that kind of big picture that needs to be in place for you to build anything of significance. And you know, for those of you who are experienced with e-commerce, this is going to be all make sense to you. And for those of you just looking at the whole thing, it's going to open up what really needs to be in place. So when you are going forward and you want to do something with your online business, that you understand what the real picture needs to be in order for you to have a real chance of making something significant out of this. Okay, so I'm going to lead you through just the basic principles, and then I'm going to give you an example of an actual client of mine right now who I've been helping. They'd actually got something up and running, they were making money, but they really hit a ceiling and were stuck. They didn't know how to get out of the hole they were in, and I really came in and did a diagnosis on the kind of big picture that I'm just about to take you through now, identified where the weak spots were and what needed to change in order for them to have success, which is now what's happened. And they've now had an amazing period of time, the last month especially, and they are really now positioned to take advantage of the changes that we had to make. So I'm going to give you a real world example based off, first of all, just taking you through what the principles are, right? So let's get stuck into some principles. I'll put up a few little slides together that will that'll make this easier to explain. All right, so let me just go ahead and share that. All right, so here we have a store, and this is what a lot of people think an online business is. They go to Shopify or they go to WordPress or whatever it is, and they set up a store and they go, great, I've got my store. It may take them 3 months, it may take them a year to work on their store, and they're proud of their products and they're proud of the photography they've done, and they've got this kind of beautiful store set up, and then they do that, and they maybe have invested all of their money at this point to make this happen, and it's crickets. There's no money. All you can see there on the picture of this screen is a store that they're visiting, and maybe their mum and their partner and their kids are visiting as well, going, yeah, well, the store looks great. Where's the money, right? Where are the people? And so, of course, the next phase of all this is you need to get people. Now, the industry term for people is traffic, but I reckon that's a pretty appalling term when you think about it. A lot of the time when I think of traffic, it's me being stuck in it, which I don't like. So I like to call them people. We need to attract people to your store who are going to make purchases. Pretty obvious, right? So there's lots of places you can get people from, and the one I'm going to just talk about here, of course, is Facebook, but that can be Google or YouTube or Pinterest or whatever. We're just going to use Facebook as an example. So anyway, so that's what a lot of people then do. They go, right, I've got to start putting some money into Facebook ads. So they go along, and it's easy to set up an ad on Facebook or Instagram, and they're very, very happy to take your money. But again, you can still see on this picture here, there's no money for you. In fact, what can often happen is you put money into Facebook ads and they go to your store or not, and you don't make any money at all, or you're making a loss. And this is a situation a lot of people find themselves in, and they go, well, how else am I going to get people to my store? And the thing is, this has to be cracked. This particular problem needs to be cracked, and it is one of the hardest things to do. You're starting from a completely stone cold start. You don't know really who are the people who are going to come to your store. You've got to go out to the world and find them. It's easy to do that, but the real challenge is being able to make it start working and converting into money, into profit for you. All right, and that's what the rest of this presentation is going to kind of touch on, is the general principles of that. Because eventually you need this to happen. You need to start getting some money out of the store, and not just some money enough to make the whole exercise worth doing, right? That's what we're all in here for. We're not in here to just work like maniacs for no money, right? We want to actually make some money. So one of the really cool things that can happen is a thing called retargeting. And this is what can really begin to help you make that money in the end. Because when someone comes from Facebook to your store, they may not make a purchase straight up. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of times where you've seen an ad or something and you've clicked through and you've had a look, but you haven't made a purchase. Well, one of the real magic things about the internet these days is if someone clicks on a Facebook ad and goes to your store and they don't make a purchase, Facebook can track who that person is. They don't tell you exactly who that person is, but they will track who that person is. And then you can say to Facebook, hey, you know all those people who came to my website but they didn't make a purchase? Could you please show them some ads? And that's what those retargeting ads is. So that's why I've got that kind of green cogwheel there. And what that green cogwheel does is it kicks Facebook in and turns that again, and then your store starts to tick over as well. And that's why I've used these cogs as kind of a visual model of the kind of thing that needs to happen. When that Facebook cogwheel really starts turning, that's when your store really begins to start turning as well. And the retargeting part of it is a real key to helping to make that work, and maybe you'll start making some money. All right. A lot of people leave it at this, and a lot of people in this situation are actually still struggling. And you think, wow, I've got all these components of the puzzle going for me. Why am I still struggling? Or why have I hit a ceiling? Which is the example of, this is about where the client came to me. They were at this kind of situation, as you'll see in a minute. They're a little bit more advanced, but I'll show you what I mean. So the very next part of this is to have an email service provider stuck into your store. And most people will go, well, of course, I've got MailChimp or whatever it is that I'm using. Of course, I need to send broadcasts and EDMs, they call them, right? So they have an email service provider, and they will send people campaigns. And what those campaigns do is they're usually like, oh, we've got a special on this month for Mother's Day, or I've got an Easter thing, or it's Christmas or Black Friday, or hey, I've just got a promotion, or would you like to go buy some stuff? And those emails send people back to the store, which is what that little orange arrow is. And of course, that begins to kick over the store. As that email service provider starts turning around that cogwheel, the store starts spinning around, and that spits out more money. And this is actually this is the example of the store that I helped out, and thank goodness they had campaigns, because the campaigns were what was really making them the money. All the Facebook and the retargeting thing really wasn't making them a lot of money, but it was getting them clients. So the retargeting and the Facebook together was turning the store over, but not making a ton. But when they then added the email campaigns in, that's what happened. Now, the next thing you need to have happening in there, besides just sending out broadcasts to people and saying, hey, go and buy some stuff, is you can have these things called flows. These are automated emails that begin to go out to people that you don't have to think about writing each month. Because putting a campaign together and doing a newsletter and all that sort of thing means each month I'm having to do work. I'm having to come up with something to send out to people. But is there some way we could automate it? And the flows are exactly what need to happen. Now, I'm calling them flows. They're also called automations or autoresponders, depending on what platform you use. And the platform I like to use when it comes to e-commerce is a platform called Klaviyo, and that's what they call them in that platform. And you'll see that later on when I give you the example of the store, right? So flows and campaigns. Now can you see that you've got something quite a lot more comprehensive going on than just having your store, right? You've got originating people coming from Facebook. If they come to your store and they don't buy, you can show them more ads again through retargeting. And then when they come back to the store the second, third, or fourth time, they're far more likely to make a purchase. Then your store is kind of ticking along and it's producing some money. But the other thing is it's producing leads and customers that then go into your email campaigns. And you can send out email campaigns that you do manually, like you might send out a newsletter once a month or once a week. And then you can actually program a whole lot of email flows to go out automatically to people that also send people back to your store. And that is what then begins to produce money. Now, when you've got this system set up, this is going to give you a lot more confidence about investing the money in the first place in driving people to your store through something like Facebook advertising or Google or whatever it is, right? But if you just had Facebook and you just had your store and you were paying money and sending people to that, then that becomes a riskier approach, because you don't have those other things in place to begin to block the holes and increase the revenue that you can generate from your store. And again, you'll see that really clearly when I take you through the case study. Now, things that you can then do once you've got this in place is you begin to optimize and improve what's going on. So whether your ads are working on Facebook or not have everything to do with the audience that you're showing the ads to. If you show your ads to people who aren't interested in your store, clearly those people aren't going to become customers. So the audience is crucial, and there's a lot of things you can do in Facebook to optimize and improve the audience and find out which audience to show your ads to. And that's why it's challenging when you're first starting, because you don't know what the audience is until you really begin to test it and find out what that audience is and begin to optimize. The next thing is the creative. What am I going to show people in my ad? Am I going to do image ads? Am I going to do a video? How do I know what one is going to work? Well, the beautiful thing about it is you don't. But the beautiful thing about it is that you can try and you can start and you can invest in figuring it out. And once you've figured it out, then everything begins to come together, as you'll see in the case study I'm going to take you through, right? Now, the next thing is the copy. What are you going to write on the ads? The copy has a big impact on whether people go through and buy from you or not. Now, a lot of people don't spend the time necessary on the copy. They just whack something up and they put it there and they go, well, I hope the copy works. And there isn't really a process for testing and improving that. And then when the ads work, they have no idea why their ads aren't working. And so really all they do is like have this, I'm going to throw stuff up against the wall and hope something sticks without having a really direct process of understanding how copy on a platform like Facebook actually turns people into buyers, right? Creates buyers, and a process to go through to really help improve that. Otherwise, you're just left guessing all the time, and that's a really kind of discomforting position to be in, especially when the store isn't working yet and you don't even know why, right? So you can work on the copy. Once you've got the audiences and the creative and the copy kind of working, that is where the real magic begins to kick in, and you can begin to optimize Facebook. All right. And the people who are really good at that, they're the people who just do Facebook advertising, and that's all they do. All day long, which is not where I play. I play in this kind of bigger picture here, and also working to help store owners like the entrepreneurs actually with their mindset going through and the overall strategic plan. But when I can get them to this stage, I then hand them off to people who are absolute specialists in scaling a business and optimizing what's going on. And I'm talking there about spending $5,000 to $10,000 a day on advertising, which is like $100,000 a month or whatever it is, up to $500,000 a month. Are some of the people I work with who do that kind of work for people. But they don't take on people who are just starting out. So there's this kind of area, this gap that needs to be filled between just starting out and getting something working, right? So that you can then take it to someone who specializes in scaling and optimizing what you do, because that's when the business can really, scale and turn into something significant. Now, when it comes to your store, of course, there's a whole lot of things that happen there, right? One of the most important things on a store is the bounce rate. So you might send 100 people from Facebook to your store and find that only 60 of them land there and the rest are gone within a second of landing on your store. Well, that means 40 of those people you paid for don't even really look at your store. And so the bounce rate on the store is a really important thing to look at. Well, how can I fix that? That's one thing you can fix. The other thing is just how many people then actually add a product to the cart. If you've ever been to a store, you'll know there's a button that says add to cart, and then you've usually got to go to checkout and you've got to go and finish your purchase. And so all along those stages are things that you can do to optimize. How many people actually initiate the checkout? How many actually then finish placing their order? And then what amount is that order? So there's a thing called average order value, which means when someone gets to your store, you might look and say, well, I had 100 purchases today and the average order value was $40. Well, wouldn't it be great if you had 100 purchases today and the average order was $80? Double that. You're making double the money for the same number of orders. So that's another thing that you can look at improving and increasing on the store, right? Because eventually all of that then leads to people coming through and making a repeat purchase. And they're going to make those repeat purchases through things like the campaigns and the flows I've got in that diagram there. And ultimately, you end up with what's called a lifetime value. That is when you have a new customer over time, like over a month or over 6 months or over a year or over 5 years, how much does that customer actually end up spending with you? It's a really important thing to know and understand about the business. And then the next one that almost no one talks about, which is really, really important, is the customer referral rate. So when you get a happy customer, how many new people does that customer bring back into your store? And that might be called word of mouth, but I'm actually talking about a real replication. You get someone who comes in and they love it so much that they get their sister or their friend or their mother or whatever comes through and becomes a client or a customer as well. So they're all the things that you need to be thinking about when you want this whole system to work. And a lot of people aren't thinking about this at all. So even though the entry to online business and like an e-commerce store is actually pretty low these days, you can go and get a Shopify store. You can start paying them money each month to have that store, but really all of that needs to be in place for you to go, right, I actually want to make something significant here. And like, if it's not going to be significant, why would you bother anyway, right? So that's what needs to happen for that to go through. Now, again, I don't go in and specifically really help with optimizing a store. There are people who are expert at that. In fact, for 2 years, I worked with the guys at Build, Grow, Scale, and that's all we did was work on optimizing the store. And those guys are absolute experts at it because that's all they do all day. And I learned an incredible amount about that. But again, your store needs to be ready and set up and going before you then go to a specialist who's going to say, right, now we're going to take things and explode them for you, right? So it's all about getting these basics in place from the get-go. So let's now jump over. I think that's all I've got. Yep, let's just jump over, and I want to take you through an example of this. I'm not going to give you the brand of the client because I don't want to breach any confidentiality there, but I am going to show you through the numbers so you can see that this is a real thing that's just happened in the last little while. Right, so if we jump over. Right, so first of all, I'm going to give you the background. I've got this whole store blurred out, but first of all, I'm going to give you the background. So they were selling, they had distribution and wholesale, and they also had an online store. And I think it was around about 50-50, but the online store was doing okay, but it really wasn't making a lot of money. And they were paying an agency to do that, so that's the situation they were in. So I'm like, okay, you've got an agency running your ads for you. And they also had Klaviyo, which is an email service provider, doing the emails, and they were doing campaigns each month, and they were making money from that. But they really hit a plateau, and they just could not get further forward, and they were kind of getting frustrated with their ad agency. So what I did was come along and I had a look, and I found a couple of things instantly. So the first thing I found was, if we just talk about Klaviyo, was that the flows that they needed in their account that could be making the money just weren't working. They had a few set up, but they weren't performing at all. Some of them were technically not set up correctly, and the others just had really inefficient or ineffective emails in there. And I knew that was something that I could help them fix really quickly. Okay, so that was one of the key things that we needed to improve, were the flows out of Klaviyo. Just one of those cogwheels, if you remember back to that diagram. The other thing I noticed was when I went to their website, which I've got blurred out here, but you can see this thing. I clicked on the little pixel thing here, and I had a look, because this will tell us how their website is integrated with Facebook, with their Facebook advertising account. And what I discovered was that it wasn't integrated with their Facebook account, or it wasn't using their pixel. It was actually using the agency's pixel, right? So if I just jump back to my diagram here, I just want to show you this so you can kind of understand. You can see here that you've got Facebook going to the store, and you've got that retargeting pixel there. Well, the way that Facebook knows who's gone and visited your store is that you need to place a bit of code on your store so that Facebook can measure who goes from Facebook to your store. That's how Facebook knows. But you can actually create that yourself, and then you've got all of that kind of data stored inside your piece of code, which is called a pixel. Well, what this agency had done was they'd put their own pixel on the client store instead of having the client's pixel on the store. So when you ask that question, who was collecting all the data over time? Was the client collecting the data, or was the agency collecting the data? Of course, it was the agency that was collecting the data. The agency was getting all this information about the people who were clicking through and going through to the store. The client didn't have that data. Now imagine 6 months down the track, you've got all this data that's now being collected, and the client says, well, I'm going to leave and go to another agency now. Well, if they leave, because they don't have that data, that would mean that they leave the agency who's now got all that data, and then this client here has to start again from scratch, even though they may have spent tens of thousands of dollars in advertising to get that data. And what can the agency now do with the data? Well, now they've got the data. They could go to any other competitor and they could say, hey, we've already got a whole lot of data. We can get your store running really quickly because we've got this data, right? So I thought that was really unethical. And what I discovered was that, yes, it was in the fine print of the contract. However, these store owners did not know. They had no idea at all that that was the situation that was going on. And so given that we then approached the agency about this and they said, yeah, okay, all right, they made some excuse and they said, we'll put your pixel on the page as well. So then what happened was at least the client did get their pixel on the page and they were able to start collecting the data. So what does this mean for you? It just means you need to make sure that your pixel is the one on your store and that you are the one collecting the data. I can't emphasize just how important that is long term. We then also discovered that when it came to their Google ads was that this agency was using their own Google account as well and not the client's Google account. So again, the client didn't get that data. And so there was that plus a range of other things as well that we're just unhappy with, that we decided, you know, I think you could go with a much, much better agency. And there's a few people who I know who are awesome at doing that. And so that was part of the value I was able to bring, is like, hang on, is your agency doing the right thing by you? Are they? And it was pretty clear and quick to find out that they weren't. And so then I was able to direct my client through to people who I know and trust to do a really good job. Right? So that was that. So that's what I discovered just by having a look at that one thing. Now let's just jump over to here. I want to show you inside the Klaviyo account. And I'm going to show you, you're looking at June 2019, right? So that puts a date on this. And you can see across the top here that the total number of conversions they had in the store that month was 331 sales. But you can see that out of the flows, these are the automated flows, that they only had 4 conversions, and that represents only 1% of the sales coming into the store are coming back through that automated flow. And when I mean automated, I literally mean it's set and forget. Once it's done, it just does its job automatically without you having to think about it day in and day out. Now you can see over here they were doing really well with their campaigns. They had 170 sales come in from the campaigns, which actually represented 51% of the revenue they got online came from the broadcasts or the campaigns that they sent out. So the one thing I want you to notice there, of course, is just how important it is to send emails to people, because when you send emails to people, you tend to make money. All right, so that's that. So that was June 2019. Let's just go through to September and actually have a look and see what happened. And again, you can see, they had, not a lot of growth in sales, 340. Again, only 5 sales from flows, being 1%. At this time, the campaigns generated almost 60% of the revenue that came in was from email that month. Right? So now let's jump through to December. Now, December is when I kind of started really working with them. And you can see again, they're actually down in sales there, 284. Flows only bringing in 3 sales, 1%. And the campaigns brought in 40% of the revenue. That's 100 and something sales that month in December. All right, now let's jump in through and just do month by month. So January, I got them writing. They were writing flows and we were starting to put them in. These are the automated flows, right? They were starting to put them in, but they weren't really live yet. And you can see again, flows, 3 sales from flows being 3% of revenue. And then if we go to February, we have a look at that. All of a sudden, you can see that the flows kicked in. Look at the number of sales coming from these flows. 49 sales came in, representing 16% of the revenue for this store that month. All right, so for the month of February. Now let's look what happens, because when the flows click in, people enter into the flow. They might receive a series of emails over a week, and so you can see there's going to be a bit of a lag time. So what happened in March? Let's have a look at that. You can see here now these flows generated 103 sales, which is 18% of the revenue now. Whereas the whole year prior to that, it was like 1% of the revenue, right? And only 3 or 4 sales. Now we're looking at 100 sales. That's a massive increase by getting those flows all set up and done correctly. And now let's just jump through to April. We can have a look here. The flows brought in 420 sales. This is automated. They didn't have to do a thing to get those sales. The emails were just all set up to automatically do it, and it now represents 27% of the revenue of that store came in from flows. Now, there's another couple of things that happened, because if you look overall, their sales on their online store are significantly increased up to 1,562. That's because we also had to go through the circumstance of changing agencies. And so I kind of had to oversee all that as well with them. So first of all, they had to give notice to their other agency, and there was a bit of argy-bargy around that. When they then finally did that, they had to swap over to the new agency. The new agency had to start off with new ads. Thankfully, we'd been able to get the pixel, the client's own pixel, installed on their store for a few months. So at least their pixel was getting educated and getting some data, so that when the new agency took over, they were able to really hit the road running and start getting great results. And of course, that's what they're doing. They're really driving hard with the traffic on both Google and Facebook, and so they're making a lot more sales on the front end, right? Now, if I just jump back to this diagram for a minute, what you'll see is this Facebook wheel here, and it's also Google, which isn't on the picture. Now this Facebook wheel here is turning a lot faster. It's bringing a lot more people into the store. A lot more people into the store brings more customers and leads into the store, which then gets these email service provider campaigns at Klaviyo spinning a lot faster. And so this specifically here, these flows, they were already set up all automatically. The more people who can get put into this flow, the more this wheel will turn, and it will turn the store and make more sales. So do you see how it's not just the flows, it's the whole kind of cohesive system at work here, where if the ads are working really well, the store's converting really well, and then these email flows and campaigns are working well, all together then everything begins to turn into something that really turns into something significant. So if we actually have a look in their Shopify store, again, you can see that I've got the last month, which is April. You can see that they've done $90,000 in sales in April. But if I compare it, you can see here I'm comparing it to the same month in 2019. It is a 259% increase in sales compared to the same time last year. And you can see this purple line here representing the sales so much higher than the month before. Now, if I actually change this from last month and actually do the last 90 days, and you can see I'm also comparing it to the previous year, and we apply that, you can see over the whole 90-day period that the sales are up just over 100% in sales. And you can see that represented by the purple line here. And you can see where that's kind of kicked in. So that's just an example of what's going on and how that simple process applied is, first of all, if you're stuck and your store isn't doing well, you need to have someone who understands that kind of cohesive system just to take a look at it and go, I can diagnose the problem here. Because if you don't know where it's wrong, then you can just spend a lot of time and a lot of money and being really frustrated at trying to fix things, but if you're not fixing the things that actually matter, then you're not going to get a change and you're not going to get a result, right? And so that's where I can come in and I have a look, and it's part of my X10 Entrepreneur program to do that. Have a look and try and understand where is the constraint here in that whole system. Where is the constraint? Where are the quick wins that need to happen? And with this particular client, it's very, very common. Again, I will have spoken to well over 100 different e-commerce and Shopify store owners personally, going through their store and having a look. And I can guarantee that common things happen commonly, right? People don't have their flows set up correctly, they don't have their ads optimized correctly, and they definitely don't have their store optimized correctly either. And all of those things need to work together holistically in order to produce an outcome that is awesome. So now this particular client is now poised to now absolutely crush it for the rest of the year, because they've got their store going, their flows going, their campaigns going, and they're working with an ad agency now who knows what they're doing, and their pixel data is all sorted out. They're in a much, much healthier situation than they ever were before. And so if we just have a bit of a deeper look at the flows, these are automatic flows. You can see that in the last 30 days, those automatic flows that got set up, they don't have to do anything. They're just in the background turning over. Those have generated $14,000 just in those last 30 days in sales without them having to do anything. Whereas before they were making 3 or 4 sales a day, so it would have been about $200 or $300 versus $14,000. I think you could see which one you would prefer to choose, $400 or $14,000 in revenue. So look, that's the kind of thing that can happen when you get it all right. And there's no rainbows and unicorns here. There's hard work, there's hard yakka. There's got to be a lot of this going on, and quite a lot of heart too, as you have to begin to invest and take the risk to be able to make this whole system work. All right, so there you go. I hope you enjoyed that look inside the kind of overall picture of what is going on, and then an example of a client that I've been working with and the changes we've been able to make. It's the kind of thing I love, tinkering with all this stuff and doing it. And it's that big picture approach I really like, because once I get people steered in the right direction and we get all the kind of assets set up ready for them to explode, then what I love doing is working with the people I know who are expert at specific areas and directing my clients into those areas to help those experts then really explode it even further. So look, if you'd like to learn more about how I work with people and what I do, there's a link you can watch the webinar, which is all about what X10 Entrepreneur is all about, what I stand for, how I work with people, why I've done it this way, and then you can figure out if you want to have a chat to me or not about how we might work together. There's a couple of different ways that I do work with people, but overall it's fun, I love doing it, it's good stuff. So again, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in another one.